Let me get started here and introduce someone who is not only fascinating but remarkable. I've met him just very briefly here, but we all have seen the remarkable career of Congressman Ron Paul. We know the challenges that he has faced in his campaign attempts, in his philosophy, and when you really get down to it, he's not far off from where we probably are. It's a lot like, you know, what he's saying is correct and in the right path, and wow, somebody is actually saying all the right things. I admire you. I always carry my little Constitution around, and littered throughout his background and resume, it talks about the constitutional issues. You would think he might have gone to Duke Law School instead of Duke Medical School, but I know he's a doctor, and proud of the fact that he's delivered, I see it very boldly in his background, over 4,000 babies. So that's an accomplishment in itself. You know, many times great speakers don't want to have me spend a lot of time trying to talk about how great they've been and the things that they've done, because in a sense that's the history of how they got to where they are. We want to hear about their future and their vision. And so if I spent more than the 2 minutes that I've already spent talking about a gentleman who grew up in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, but as his wife told me, moved to Texas as fast as he could and has been here in Texas longer than he's been in Pennsylvania. So he has been duly classified and as a Texan, representing the 14th Congressional District that makes up Brazoria, Wharton, so many other the beautiful counties in the state, and actually can be considered the home of the Texas Capitol. I think that's the way it reads. But going into the part that makes him so unique is that sound fiscal policy that you will hear, I'm sure, tonight about what he believes in. His belief that if it's not in the Constitution, then it shouldn't be there. And just one anecdote that I have to say. I talked to my son who's a senior in high school, and he's taking accounting and business math, and I talked to him about income tax and how the government's going to take your money, whether you win it in the lottery, whether you win it on Jeopardy, whether you work hard for it. And he looks at me and says, "Dad, that is so unfair." And all I can say is get involved in politics and government and make some changes. Well, I wish he was here tonight to listen to the gentleman who is trying to make those kinds of changes. Once again, I have a lot that I could say about him. You know, we have internet. You can find out about it. Without further ado, Congressman Ron Paul, it's my pleasure.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much for that nice introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation here to come to the Thurgood Marshall Law School. This to me is a real honor and a challenge to talk about our difficult issues that we face today. And it's an exciting political year. A lot of people have been paying attention to politics this year. So it's a nice to come and visit. Matter of fact, I have a hard time turning down invitations if I can get to a college campus, because I don't know if anybody noticed in the last go-around in the presidential race that we did generate a lot of enthusiasm with young people. And that to me gave me a lot of hope, because if I'm on the right track, if I'm really, trying to get people to go in a certain direction, if it is the right thing to do, I mean, you have to have the young people. If the next generation grows up and they still think, well, let's do it like, like it's been done for the last 50 years. And I think that's been happening. There's always been some who have been disgruntled. And there's always dissent, and if you come from a conservative view, you might say, well, we heard about that with Goldwater, then we heard about it with Reagan, and then we heard about it in 1994, and then in 2000. But this year's something different. I think there's much more disenchantment. And it isn't so much that people have given up on accepting the idea that the government should be doing all these things, that we should run a welfare state, cradle to grave, and that we should be the policemen of the world. It isn't so much that they've come to that conclusion. A lot of us have. I mean, I've argued the case that like we ought to follow the Constitution, and if you do, the government is very limited. And I think what has happened, though, this year, and it's been going on for a couple years, I think I've more or less tapped into that, and it's been going on in the last 2 or 3 years, is the recognition that the current economic system is not viable. It's not working very well. Matter of fact, it's not working hardly at all, and not too many people are saying, very soon it's going to be much better. No, they were criticizing our president today because, the most he could offer is, if we hadn't done this, it could have been a lot worse. And he may be, indicating that things could be a lot worse, but politically, they were arguing with the president. They said, no, you're not supposed to say that. It could be worse. That doesn't make anybody feel better. So it is different now than I think ever before, because I think the people who have argued that we shouldn't be doing it and our fiscal conservatives didn't want it, I think people who are on the receiving end, the people who say, well, my check has to come and I'm dependent on it, and I get my medical care, I get my education and all, that they get a little worried, what's going to happen? This, it was announced today for the second time in a row that Social Security beneficiaries aren't going to get an increase. And the argument goes that, there's no inflation. Well, if you've been around and paying any attention, there is a lot of inflation out there. And you got to look at the commodity prices and a few other things, repair bills, doctor bills, education bills. There's a lot of price inflation going on. And one thing that hasn't happened yet has been that the huge amount of money created here since the crisis hit in the year 2000 hasn't even gone into the economy. What's happened is that we are experiencing the old saying about they're pushing on a string. They're trying to push all that credit into the economy, and that's supposed to make everybody happy. Everybody spend money. Spending money is going to cause investments. And it's a fallacy that Keynes promoted. Deficit financing and spending and printing money solves all problems. And the reason people believe that is on the short run, in the early stages of a huge financial bubble, every time it would leak, which it has been doing, injection of money and spending seems to help, even though the bubble just gets bigger. And this has been going on literally since the 1970s. I got fascinated with Austrian free market economics in the 60s and the 70s. And when Nixon came along and said that, we're in trouble, it was the initial stages of our bankruptcy, because we no longer could honor our commitment to back our dollar with gold. We had 700 million ounces of gold, gave away approximately 500 million ounces of gold at $35 an ounce. Even though we had printed and flooded the world with dollars, everybody knew the price of gold, the dollar price of gold, was much higher. But we had made the promise and would look bad, and nobody likes to admit bankruptcy. So 500 out of 700, we, met our commitment and gave the gold away, until finally Nixon realized that we can't continue to do it. He closed the gold window, said we're going to hang on to our 262 million ounces of gold, put on wage and price controls, put on tariffs and all these things. And the 70s were a bad year. We had a lot of price inflation. We had that thing called stagflation. The economy very, very weak, and prices kept going up. And most people believe that prices go up when you have a good economy. Everybody's buying and selling and stimulating. But that's not true. You can have depressions. Think of the third world nations. Think of Zimbabwe. I mean, was it a thriving economy and prices were high? Well, the value of the money was going down. So the prices were still, going up regardless. So we have a long way to go, but I think we've got here because we have failed to follow some of the basic premises that our country was founded on. And I want to talk a little bit about that. Because it's structural. I don't like to identify with those who will tinker with the budget. Tinker here and tinker there and move troops here, move troops there. I think it's very structural, very philosophic, very fundamental. And our guideline was supposed to have been the Constitution. Every member of Congress takes the same oath of office, and I'm considered, and even those who disagree with me never, ridicule me for being a strict constitutionalist. They say, oh yeah, he's a very strict constitutionalist, and he's a principled person. But at the same time, most of the rest are voting for all these things one way or the other. I believe what our founders had discovered was the understanding about what rights are. And I believe, and Jefferson was very clear in the Declaration of Independence, said that liberty means that we have a natural right to our life. That's what it means to me. We have a natural right, a God-given right to our life. And and the government's purpose is to protect that liberty. And not much more. It's when you get off on tangents that we get into trouble. And we've never had a system, probably America had the best system of emphasizing personal liberty than any other system. And there was a lot of prosperity and a lot of wealth, and yet in the last 100 years I would say that we have rejected the principles, yet we have stayed on the surface wealthy, consuming the wealth that we had created, but at the same time we were borrowing a lot of money. And you can appear to be wealthy if your banker keeps loaning you $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 a month. You can look very wealthy, but eventually you have to pay the bill. So in the last 100 years, but especially 50 years, and especially since the 1970s when the Bretton Woods broke down, things have been based on trust in a currency that had no value, plus the borrowing of money. But the principles of liberty, I think, have been long time forgotten and not applied very well. We've lost confidence that the country could operate. We don't really trust freedom. We think, oh yes, that sounds like a good idea, and I'm for it. Except how would this be done? And how would this be done? This wouldn't be happen. If you didn't have government in education, there'd be no education. If you didn't have government in medical care, there'd be no medical care. If you didn't have our government policing the world, there'd be constant fighting and killing. Yeah. Well, and then if we end up with a financial crisis where the checks bounce, the Social Security checks bounce, and medical care keeps going down in quality, then you say, well, even this idea, even if it's based on good intentions, it really hasn't, solved our problems, and we have to adjust that. But this principle of liberty, I can apply it in several areas, and I know later on we'll have some questions and we can clarify anything, but I think the most important thing to me is the principle that we have a right to our life, and we should have a right to the fruits of our labor. But that doesn't work unless you accept the notion that nobody can use force, nobody can initiate force against another person. And that means individuals can't do it and governments can't do it. So if Bastiat wrote this neat little book in the 19th century called The Law, and I think all law students ought to read The Law by Bastiat, because his simple premise was, if you as an individual can't do it, why should the government be able to do it? One that applies to what I talk about so much is we know that any of us in the room are not allowed to counterfeit our money, right? What happens? You go to jail pretty quickly. They watch that. But what does the Federal Reserve do? They have a monopoly over counterfeiting our money, and look at the mess we're in. So if we're not allowed to counterfeit money, government shouldn't be allowed to counterfeit money. But we could, as our Constitution grants us, the authority to make sure our money is honest weights and measures. That's been around a long time. That's biblical. That you shouldn't cheat people. Should have honest scales, and you should have honesty in money.